Okay, great. So, how is your day today? How are you? Yes,
Fine, very normal.
very normal. What is the need to use this qualitative? Very normal.
So because there's nothing new presently, all the same.
All the same, right? Very normal. Anyway, so we were talking about T.S. Eliot as a poet, and in the last class, we were just talking about the kind of possible influences which he was into, especially his grandfather, his father, his mother, and especially the one, his better, his wife. Please be on time, Anna. All of you are requested to be on time. Please join before 11:10. Okay. Anyway, and we were also talking about some of his critical precepts, especially his definition of poetry, which talks about uh, an escape from emotion and an escape from personality, which is, yes, in opposition to what Wordsworth opined as far as his conception of poetry is concerned. We also talked about his idea of objective correlative, and we also talked about especially his observations regarding the metaphysical poetry in terms of association of sensibilities and then dissociation of sensibilities, and several things. And I would like you to read. Yes, perhaps you must have read it. His essay, "Tradition and Individual Talent," which is a very seminal one, because it talks about the kind of role tradition has in one's life, and how can one uh, be individualistic, and how can one be original at the same time, right? So, tradition and individual talent, and there he talks about this two aspects of personality, uh, the mind which creates and the man which suffers. The mind which creates and the man which suffers, right? And this must be taken very seriously, because this is another very important point to talk about his concept of objective correlative. Mind is something different, but the man who is suffering is something different. So he makes a difference between these two aspects of the poet, right? Uh, we also talked about how Eliot believes that poetry is not a spontaneous overflow, rather it is an organization. It's an organization whereby one has to tackle different issues, one has to tackle different patterns, different sets of emotions into something, into a product. So these are the things which we tried to understand last day. Today I shall be talking about some of his poetic beliefs, some of his poetic credos, some of his poetic ideals, which are necessary for all of us to know him as a poet, right? So, T.S. Eliot as a poet must be taken as a reactionary, as a reactionary against, yes, the question is against, still somebody has come out. A reactionary against florid, flowery, bombastic, pomp and show style of Spencer and other Elizabethan poets, right? So he is reactionary. He uh, responds to the writing style of Spencer and other Elizabethan poets, which are, according to him, florid, flowery, bombastic, full of pomp and show. Instead of this, uh, he talks about, as I said, just he talks about poetry as an organization, trimming, pruning, you see, and lots of tools are involved, right? So just you can well think of the kind of poetry Eliot is talking about. And whatever he is doing something in terms of a tradition which is there, be it a tradition of a Spencerian time, that is Elizabethan times, or even the Romantic age in that way. uh, just 1 second, just please give me some time. It's an important. Yes. So I was caught into something important. Anyway, so Eliot, just first aspect of his poetic belief and poetic credo. Uh, Eliot, as a poet, is very much fond of, so far it is clear to you now, he is very much fond of the kind of poetry metaphysical writers wrote. Metaphysical writers wrote. And you have read metaphysical poetry. If I have to talk to you and if I ask you to please enlighten me about two or three important aspects of metaphysical poetry, what would be your response? Yes, I need two or three responses from this class. Yes,
Metaphysical conceit.
metaphysical conceit. Okay, then good conceit and
Far-fetched images.
please switch on your camera, है ना? बताइए आपको देखे कितने दिन हो गए? Switch on your camera. हाँ, conceit is far-fetched imagery ना यार. Don't translate that. हाँ, okay. कौन आया है अब इतना लेट? इनका स्वागत करिए भाई. Ah, what else? Okay, tell me, what? How does Johnson, Dr. Samuel Johnson, what is his opinion regarding metaphysical school of poetry? Just one or two observations. That's all. Even I don't remember. I'm just asking you. I'm just seeking your help, my friends. Please enlighten me. What did Johnson say about this school of poetry? Anything you remember? Hello? You have to appear in next examination, maybe this semester or that semester. And this is not expected from you. Please be vigilant, be careful. It's my request. Anyway.
Sir,
Uh, uh.
Samuel Johnson said that the metaphysical poets they violently yoke together very different ideas, images to portray a certain concept.
Violently yoked together different ideas. Okay? Okay, good. Now let me help you out. First of all, Johnson opined that, please rectify if I rectify me if I am wrong. Johnson opined that metaphysical poets were the main of learning. Main of what? Learning, right? Erudite scholars, pedantic. Yes, na? Am I wrong? Do you remember this? Erudite learning, scholars, pedantic. Yes, na? Yes. And and he uses the phrase discordia concourse. Yes. Discordia concourse. Dissimilar images. And the very moment, as she has talked about, the yoking of different ideas together. First thing. The second thing is, how can one yoke, how can one invoke, how can one read different ideas together? A common man, a layman? No. Erudite scholars, pedantic ones, those who are well read, those who have diversified area of knowledge. Getting na? Concordia discourse in that way. And now just apply these things to Eliot. Eliot is scholastic, pedantic, erudite, and his poetry is not one poem. The West learned is not one poem. This is the conglomeration, assemblage, as you say, collage of different poems, different writings, different texts invoked, yoked together. It means the poetry, according to Eliot, should be elusive. What is that word? Elusive. 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 Indirect, which are there outside. Elusiveness. And this is possible only when one has the knowledge of tradition. tradition of reading, tradition of writing, tradition of composing, and in that way, Eliot is pedantic. He is one erudite scholar, and he is, in a way, extension, I would say rather, extension of metaphysical poets. Am I clear? Elusiveness. Okay, please tell me.
Yes, sir, it's clear.
Okay, the moment one talks about elusiveness, it means references to other texts which are pertinent, not pertinent, right? Which is simply based on scholarly observations. Will this kind of poetry be simple or complicated? Easy or complex? Yes. Complicated and complex. Complicated and complex. So the poetry of Eliot is easy? I don't think so. It's what? Complex and complicated. Now, according to Eliot, ensuing from his first belief, that is what? Scholarship, pedantic attitude, and erudite knowledge. Just coming forth, ensuing from that position only, he says that poetry should be more comprehensive. 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 It means poetry should have that solemnizing power of different disciplines. So I was talking about background to modern literature. So I was talking about economics, psychology, science, anthropology, sociology, right now? Likewise, these aspects should become the part and parcel. Should become what? The part and parcel, comprehensive. Look at 20th century. 20th century is a century of great discoveries, great inventions. And if a poet is a scholar, how can poet remain aloof from these discoveries, inventions, writings, these exposure, this exposition of knowledge? How can he remain aloof? Should he remain aloof? The answer is no. That's why in Eliot, we do not only find references to other texts in terms of allusiveness, allusions leading to illusions for common readers, but we also find that his poetry, especially the Westland, is comprehensive as it employs the jargons, the topics, and thoughts of different diversified fields into itself. We shall see that. How? Am I clear? Comprehensive. Okay? Now, according to Eliot, the poetry should be indirect. Indirect. And this indirectness must be understood, first of all, in the light of whatever we have been discussing in terms of what? Objective correlative, first of all, indirect, and he says that the kind of society 20th century is diversified, complex, plethoric. These must be incorporated in a poetic writing, and he is of the opinion that this complexity, this comprehensiveness must be rendered in the same amount of complexity. Mind it. He doesn't talking about complexity, writing about complexity in an easy manner. No. The complexity of the situation should be done in an equal complex form. Should be done in what? In an equal complex form. Tough man. Eliot is a tough man, don't worry. Right? And what does he say about this? He says, to do so, he says, to do so, the poet must become more and more comprehensive, as I said earlier. He should be more elusive. Again, he should be what? More comprehensive, more elusive, more indirect, doing violence to the syntax. Doing what? Violence. Doing violence to what? To the syntax. Grammar. Doing violence to the syntax in order to force, to give momentum, to give a move, in order to force, to dislocate, in order to force, to dislocate, if necessary, the language into his meaning. the language into his meaning. This is the poetic ideal. This is the poetic credo. To be more comprehensive, to be more elusive, to be more indirect, doing violence to the syntax in order to force, to dislocate, if possible, language into his meaning. This is what metaphysicals did. This is what Eliot did in his poetry, especially the West land. Am I clear? Hello?
Yes, sir.
Yes. Any questions so far? Any observation? Yes. Yes. No issue. Eliot's poetry, Eliot's poetry then becomes, Eliot's poetry then becomes a storehouse, a place where the poet uses symbols, irony, paradox, pun, ambiguity, juxtaposition, and several references and cross references. And all these things, whatever I have just said, symbol, irony, pun, ambiguity, ambivalence, juxtaposition, references, they all are the techniques, the tools of new criticism. New criticism. It also means that Eliot as a poet, does not adhere, does not follow, and does not conform to traditional grammar, traditional syntax, and traditional metrical composition. Instead, as he was in France for some time, and in France he was deeply influenced by a contemporary French poet, Jules Laforgue, Jules, Jules Laforgue, Laforgue, Jules Laforgue, who gave him a new idiom, a new technique, and a new style of writing, which we commonly understand as verse libre, free verse, verse libre, or in English, free verse. Jules Laforge. He also taught him the poetic shorthand, which talks about, in a way, the Imagist movement, which in turn talks about precision, clarity, compactness, and compression. What is that? Compression. Right? Jules Laforge, the French poet. And all this, and all this, if you take them together, you might come to an idea that, see, I'm not reading a poet, I'm not reading a poem, rather, I am doing a crossword puzzle. Because each sentence is so much full of meaning, and each sentence, if not each, maybe almost third or fourth, if in that way, is in turn referring to whatever I have just been talking about. So you seem to think to read a poem in your leisure with a cup of coffee mug on your couch or sofa with a pillow everywhere, and you plan to read The Wasteland, please, it's a dream which will never come to true. It's such a difficult poem to understand, such a difficult poem to read. Okay, but don't worry. We shall try to do the poem in the possible simplest manner. And we have to do it online, virtual. One of the difficulties, but I will try, and so you too, right? Yes, na? Please.
Yes, sir.
Yes. Something to ask right now? You can ask. Yes. Haji, do you have something to ask? You can ask. Or do you want some more clarifications on any of the points discussed? You can ask. Because from tomorrow I shall be talking about the wasteland, not the poem, but introduction to the wasteland. And maybe from day after tomorrow we shall be coming to the text of the wasteland. So one more class I need where I can, well, initiate you, introduce you to this wasteland of 20th and 21st, and I don't know how many centuries to come we have to face this. Okay, just ask, or just let me say thank you so much for your patient listening. And what else?
Is it
Yes, somebody is speaking. Please switch on
like
your camera. I want to
my
see you.
my
Huh?
camera is on? Can you see me, sir? My
Oh,
camera is on.
okay, okay.
Yeah.
Uh.
Yes, sir. Just wanted to ask that isn't what Eliot is trying to say about the complexity and use of jargon, isn't it in stark contrast with what Derrida said in the later half of the 20th century about simplifying and deconstructing text by avoiding using jargons?
See, there's one inherent paradox. Remember Shakespeare's Polonius talking to his son Laertes what to do and what not to do in France in 1.5 pages, and then he says, "Brevity, the soul of wit." So is the case of Jacques Derrida. Derrida talks about simplifying, but I wonder how many of you have read him and how many of you found him simple. It's so complex. It's so complex. Anyway, I can't stop laughing. Anyway, so there is the Prachi, you said the right question. So Derrida talks about simplifying, and Derrida talks about the simplifying process of a different sort, different kind, right? Where his simplification process is more about finding other ways, finding other alternatives, finding other perspectives, right? So we may talk about him later on, but this is the paradox of Eliot as well, because Eliot, as a poet, aimed to write about the society. He aimed to write about the kind of, though he denies that, though he denied, yes, that's a different factor. But let him deny. Let him deny. Why would I accept him and his denial? Though who denied that this is a kind of social criticism, right? But it doesn't matter. This is a social criticism, and this is the kaleidoscopic picture and picturesque. It's a kind of cinematography. What is that? Cinematographical style, whereby the writer has a lens and his camera and is looking at everything from his lens in that way. And this is the paradox, that he is talking about the society for the common human being, perhaps, but the paradox is, the contradiction is, not a single common human being as a reader can grasp his poem, especially the Westland, right? So this is not the poem which is meant for, as I said, for your leisure and for your comfort. No, this is a kind of a crossword puzzle, it's a kind of mental exercise, right? And this goes with his idea that the complexity of a society must be expressed in the equal complex style and form, right? So yes, he talks about that, he does that, and now he is no more, and we have to understand Eliot and his complexity, and we should be ready to appreciate him, to open our heart, to accept him as a kind of genius he was, who could write such a poem, such a gripping poem, which could be the, as I said, the conglomeration, the assemblage, or the pastiche or the patchwork of different other maybe hundreds of texts, it's a difficult one. So don't worry, Derrida has said to make it simple, so we shall try to make it simple, na? Right, na, Prachi? So we shall try to make it simple. Don't worry. We shall follow Derrida.
Okay, sir.
Yes. So I think I should come to an end, and hopefully, I'm quite sure that you all have the text, the waistline with yourself, right? If you don't have it in a hard copy, please have it a soft copy, as a soft copy, and we shall, as I said, most positively, we shall start the poem from day after tomorrow, or maybe. Okay, okay then. Thank you so much, and bye bye. See you again.
Thank you, sir.
Thank
Thank you.